Welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us.
My name is Deirdre Miller, and I'm a librarian at the Shoreline Library, and we're proud to have this program tonight called Humanity's Future in Space, sponsored by the Friends of the Shoreline Library. Thank you. And we have Sean McClinton, organizer of Space Entrepreneurs, may I say that right, to talk to you about what's happening in space right now. All kinds of things from SpaceX to NASA, and I'm sure you'll learn more from the source in just a minute. And we'll get started. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's a nice evening out. Hopefully this will be a pretty good substitute for being at the beach or what you might otherwise be doing. Thank you to Shoreline Library, Friends of the Library, for allowing me to be here and present. It's a really exciting opportunity to get to be in the same room with other people like you who are enthusiastic about space, interested in space, and presumably you guys believe that there is some future for humanity in space, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. So I share that belief with you guys, and we'll share with you kind of where I see things going. I'm Sean McClinton. I organize Space Entrepreneurs, so we are a network of about 300 people in the Seattle area. First of all, can you guys hear me okay? I don't have a mic, but everybody in the back okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. So we are, again, a network of about 300 people, anywhere from a space enthusiast to an industry professional, but primarily entrepreneurs. So people who have an idea for how to develop space, to do something cool in space, to do something good for humanity, that we meet regularly. So that's kind of a little bit about me and who I am. So we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit about me. That's me on the right. This is circa 1986. It's my homemade astronaut costume. Thanks, Mom, for that. On the left is my sister, Jessica. Jessica actually happens to be a librarian in the King County Library System. So if you see her, make sure you tell her about her clown costume. So the reason why I picked this picture is because I just wanted to show you guys that I have been interested in space for a long time. And finally, I'm actually doing something about it. So these were my influences growing up in the space industry. So you guys probably know at least 2 out of the 3 people there. Captain Kirk on the right, I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad.
And then that's Darth Vader.
That is Darth Vader, you are correct. Yes. Darth Vader has been, haunting children since, forever.
1977.
1977, there you go, since the first Star Wars. So, how many of you know who that is in the middle? Yeah, that's Kristen McCullough, for those of you who don't know. She was to be the first private citizen to visit space, non-government employee, aboard the Shuttle Challenger. Unfortunately, she didn't make it. Space Shuttle Challenger exploded in about 72 seconds after impact. That's this image here. I was in first grade. It was the same year of that picture of me in the astronaut costume. I can still remember the looks on my teachers' faces in our first grade classroom, because Kristen McCullough was a teacher, and she was to be the teacher in space. That was a program. So it set NASA back a long ways, but a lot of people have picked up the slack. I'll talk more about that. So I kind of thought my career in space was going to look something like this. Maybe riding the space shuttle or something like that. Unfortunately, my career ended up going more that way.
Is that you in the background?
Yeah, I've lost all my hair. So I found myself sitting there one day after I woke up from that meeting and was drawing just an endless amount of orange lines on PowerPoint, and realized there probably should be something more to life than this. I have 3 young children at home and wanted to kind of set a good example for them and do something important that I thought was meaningful. So what I did was I founded Space Entrepreneurs, and that's the group I talked about. This is our event last summer. Let's see here. Yep, that's Marina Park in Kirkland. This is Eric Anderson. He is the founder of Space Adventures. They are the only company to have sent private paying tours to the International Space Station for around $20 to $40 million per trip.
Yeah, they've already made that.
Yes, 7 people have made the trip. One person has gone twice. That's Charles Simoni, Microsoft fame and fortune, who lives in the area. So I wanted to start tonight's discussion with a little bit of perspective here. So this is the Milky Way galaxy. You can see there's some people with a little campfire right there. A lot of us, when we think of space, the history of space exploration and development, think maybe 50 or 100 years in the past. But actually, human beings as a species and our ancestors have been looking up at the sky for as long as we've been around. So we kind of started looking up and wondering, okay, what are stars? What are we seeing here, and what does it mean? And throughout history, we often interpreted the heavens in a religious context and astrological context. But over time, as technology and ideas improved, people started to realize that space was a place that we could go to. So that's kind of where we are now. The past 100 years, we finally figured out how to get to space. And now we're at a point that we can get there, and we're kind of asking ourselves, what are we going to do now that we can get there? Actually, fairly easily a lot of the time. The other context and perspective I want to talk about is space has kind of been the domain of people like this. What I mean is, here you've got Neil Armstrong, the first person on the moon, and of course Luke Skywalker. NASA and science fiction, the government and science fiction, have traditionally held sole domain over space exploration and development because space has been expensive and hard to understand. And what I'm hoping to kind of show you guys tonight is that it's not as expensive, it's not as far out as it used to seem. So tonight I'll just be talking about primarily what's happening in the inner solar system. And what they look at right here is Mars. The inner solar system is from Mars to the sun. That's where I think a lot of the exciting stuff is going to be happening in the next 5, 10, 15 years. There certainly is a lot of stuff that's very interesting in the outer solar system happening beyond Mars. A lot of you, I think, had heard of Pluto, the New Horizons spacecraft, and what it has done and found, and that's totally amazing. But again, for this talk, a lot of the cool stuff is happening in the inner solar system. Right here, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is an altitude chart. So right there, you see Mount Everest at 29,000 feet. That's a commercial airliner flying just above that height. You go a little bit higher, you got a weather balloon, meteors. This thin red line, it's not a real line, but that is called the Kármán line, which is the internationally recognized edge of space at 100 kilometers high. This is 62 miles. If you drove a car straight up after you left here for an hour, you would get to the edge of space. So really talking anything from the Kármán line up is considered space. Here's the shuttle and the space station orbit at about 225 miles. So that's kind of the physical dimensions we're talking about when we talk about
So
space.
space is closer than Seattle is to Bellingham.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah. Depending on traffic, right? I don't know. I'm just joking. Yeah, I don't know the exact miles, but I'll take your word for it. So here, again, kind of blowing up that image on the side, this line is the Kármán line that I mentioned. And this red line would be, for example, if you, suborbital space tourism is you're going to reach the Kármán line, but gravity is going to pull you right back down. So you're just going to have just a small window of time being weightless and in space. Versus orbital tourism or orbital missions, you're going to reach a much higher altitude, and you're going to hit about 17,000 miles an hour. And really what's happening is you're perpetually falling around the Earth. So you never get pulled down by gravity. Sometimes, a minor boost here and there, but that's how orbital mechanics essentially work. Okay, so I have to go over here to start a video for you guys. This is one of my favorite videos. This is SpaceX's very first launch to the International Space Station. What I like about this video is it captures the excitement that's happening in commercial space. It's a little bit behind the scenes. You may not read about it, but there's a lot of passionate, committed people who are very excited about what they're doing here. So I think I may be on mute here. Bear with me while I turn the volume back up. Nope, sorry, that's my daughter in the bath.
I hate movies.
I have to go up anything more recent than that. Kind of keeps me going in the day to see pictures of my kids. Okay. See Elon Musk.
What city they launched this at? Florida?
Yes. Pitch cake is to reach orbit. First stage of the rocket, they said. Canadarm grabbing the spacecraft from the space station.
They're initiating the capture of the Dragon. Stand by. Capture is confirmed. Houston Station, looks like we got us a Dragon by the tail.
I spent quite a bit of time poking around in here this morning, just looking at the engineering and the layout, and I'm very pleased. So flying up in a human-rated Dragon is not going to be an issue.
So I don't know about you guys, but that video still gives me goosebumps after the 365th time I've watched it. But again, I think it captures the excitement of what's happening behind the scenes and how everybody's kind of feeling. So why do we go to space? Why are we doing this? What's kind of driving us as a species and as all these companies and organizations? I see three factors really: curiosity, opportunity, and survival. So I'll talk a little bit more about each. Curiosity. I think the number one thing driving us in terms of curiosity is the question of, is there life outside of Earth in the universe? What struck me about this chart is here you've got on the x-axis you've got years going forward in time, and then you have numbers of exoplanets, which are planets outside of our solar system. So in 1988, we hadn't discovered anything. Here's our first one in 89, and it's kind of sporadic, and then it starts to climb, and then we hit this hockey stick kind of growth curve where in 2014 we discovered 850 individual exoplanets outside of the solar system. So
Does any of them have life?
that's what we're trying to figure out.
Oh.
We don't know yet, but
They probably don't.
just about later. So my generation and all the generations before were asking the question, is there life outside of Earth? And I think your guys' generation, this current generation now will ask the question, what will life look like when we find it? In fact, NASA came out and said, we expect to find extraterrestrial life. They did say that they expect it to be microbial, which means just little tiny, almost bug-like life, but that's a big shift in NASA's stance towards extraterrestrial life. So,
What was the cost for it? Yeah, what was the huge spike? How much some are blue and some are green?
yeah, so
New telescope?
exactly, yeah, that's thanks to Kepler. I'm sorry, thanks for reminding me. Kepler is orbiting the sun right now, And it is looking for minute differences in a star's light that's caused by a planet orbiting. And so, actually, Kepler has since stopped functioning, but not before it discovered all this. Yes?
What are the different colors stand for?
I think that the types of planets, so gas giants, rocky planets and so forth. So one of the rocky planets they just recently discovered that's got everybody excited is Kepler 452b. Kepler 452b is now being called Earth's cousin, and that's because it's only about 5% larger than Earth. It orbits its star in what's called the habitable zone, which is the zone that's not too hot and not too cold, that they believe could support water, and we believe that water is the fundamental ingredient for life. So they know it's a rocky planet already. It's, I think, several thousand light years away, so it's still too far to be able to visit, but it's still an exciting step in terms of finding life that might be like our own. The next piece of curiosity, I think this is what I am interested in. I'm sure lots of you are interested as well, is what would it be like to go to space? What's it like to visit? What would it look like? What would it feel like? This is an astronaut, and she's in what's called the cupola on the International Space Station. This is a 3-meter window, and a lot of astronauts will tell you, or quoted as saying, they just can't spend enough time in this cupola looking down at the Earth. So again, she's about 225 miles up, and it's actually so, I'm just going to show you this book I brought, but the effect is so profound that somebody actually wrote a book about it. It's called The Overview Effect. So I don't know if the library carries it, but it's written by Frank White, and it's a collection of interviews by Frank White with NASA astronauts talking about what it's like and what happens to an astronaut when they visit space psychologically, and there's tons of profound effects. They say you just can't be prepared, and all the training that NASA astronauts get, which is years, nothing can prepare them for the physical beauty of seeing the Earth from that altitude. And there's also some psychological realizations from having that perspective. So I'm not going to play too many videos. This is 2 of 3, but I thought this one was good because it'll give you a feel for what it would look like to actually orbit the Earth. So this is from the space station. Thunderstorm right there. That is the atmosphere, that great line.
It's a lot faster than the 6 miles it's going a second up there, right?
Yeah, this is time lapse, so it is definitely faster than the There's the sunrise right there. It happens every 90 minutes. That's the Caribbean right there. kind of a sense of what it might be like to orbit the Earth. Again, you're orbiting every 90 minutes at 17,000 miles an hour. If you notice that thin green line, that was the atmosphere. That's another effect they talk about in this book, is that astronauts realize how thin and fragile life is on Earth because the atmosphere, you kind of take it for granted. The other thing is, there was a German astronaut who talked about being able to see rocket fire from the Gaza Strip and some of the violence that was happening. But when you're up in space, you don't see the geographical borders that you would on a Google Maps or on a globe. And so again, there's a realization, wondering why are people fighting? We're actually all one people, and it's all one land. So a lot of experiences there. So moving on to opportunity as the next kind of motivator for us as a species. Sir Richard Branson, he's holding a model of Spaceship One. Back in 2004, he teamed with Paul Allen and a guy named Burton Tam, aeronautics expert, to build this spacecraft. So really what you're seeing is actually two craft here. One is really like an airplane, just a long wingspan airplane. Actually, that's up here. Down here is the actual spaceship, Spaceship One. They competed in what's called the X Prize, and the competition was for the first company or group to send a spacecraft into space to reach the Kármán line twice within 2 weeks, and the winner would get $10 million. So there were a number of participants, some serious, some not. They won, and they received the $10 million, and actually have been developing a company ever since. You guys may have heard of it by now, Virgin Galactic, part of the Virgin Group. That's their current space plane, Spaceship Two, designed to hold 6 passengers in the fuselage here and 2 pilots. This would be a 90-minute experience from takeoff to touchdown. You would get about 4 minutes of weightlessness, where you'd be able to get out of your seat and look out the window. You would see the curvature of space. You wouldn't have quite the view that you would from the space station, but it'd still be kind of a cool experience. You'll experience lots of G-forces, which is the force of gravity, which gets multiplied when you're going at a higher angle outside to break Earth's gravity. You guys also may have heard that there was an accident with one of the Virgin Galactic flights, and it was unfortunate. It probably set Virgin Galactic back at least a year, maybe more. We don't really know. The NTSB has just determined that it was partially pilot error, and there was partially some safety measures that the spaceship company who manufactured this did not take. So in the space business, there's always accidents and always things that happen. I think us in the community, everybody in the community looks at it as just part of the deal. Space is still difficult and challenging, and things like this are going to happen. But Virgin Galactic has already started building a second spaceship, and it may allow another competitor to leapfrog them. There's a company called X-Corp offering flights for about half the cost of Virgin Galactic for suborbital experiences. So we'll see what happens now. But suborbital tourism, that should be the very first more publicly available space tourism experience. Another interesting plane, do you guys know what this is? Anybody? You got it. Yeah, this is Blue Origin. This is a recent test flight of theirs, which is very significant. Reached about 300,000 feet, did not quite reach space, but Blue Origin, founded by Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame, he founded the company with pretty much his own money. They were kind of in a real secretive state, not really telling anybody what they're doing. With this launch, they relaunched their website and are now taking inquiries from interested passengers aboard this spacecraft. So this is a little bit different than a Virgin Galactic experience. Virgin Galactic is more like an airplane. This is a vertical takeoff rocket. So this will be suborbital as well, but we'll take private tourists. They're based right here in Kent, Washington, with launch facilities in Texas. And you can't have a conversation about space tourism and the development of space without talking about Elon Musk. Founder of SpaceX, true visionary in the space industry. He is standing in front of the new Dragon capsule. So this piece will sit on top of that rocket you saw in the video. And this will take the very first NASA astronauts privately, by a private company, into space. I think they have 7 or 8 seats, which will be enough for a NASA crew, plus a few additional paying tourists. So they designed it that way purposely. And Elon, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, they are all playing the game of trying to bring the cost of launch down from basically the space shuttle. So space shuttle program costs about $40 billion over its life, which averages to about $1 billion per launch. And that's where you've got the, around $20 to $40 million for the space station price. A Falcon rocket is about $60 million a launch. So right now it costs about $10,000 a kilogram to transport anything into space. So when these companies can get the cost of launch down, which is what SpaceX is doing, then it means a larger market because of lower prices for people like you and I to be able to visit space. So once we get there, once the prices fall and it's open to more of us, the question is, what are we going to do? This is Robert Bigelow. He founded Budget Suites of America. They're kind of a low-cost motel chain based out of Las Vegas. Behind him is inflatable habitat that was developed by NASA. There are 2 of these prototypes that are orbiting the Earth right now above us. They're going to send up the 3rd. And the reason why it's significant is because you can do a lot of things with these. You can, say, manufacture something in space. You can perform microgravity research. You could use it as a space hotel. So these exist, and the next one will attach to the International Space Station for testing and that type of thing. So you can pretty quickly see as prices of launch fall and things like this arise, there's going to be lots more people living and working in space pretty quickly. So the next piece of the equation that's interesting, I think, to all of us in this room is what's happening right here in Seattle. We talked about SpaceX, who actually just opened an office in Seattle in June. So I think they have about 100 employees, and Elon was quoted as saying it could be 1,000 in a few years. Aerojet Rocketdyne, pretty much every spacecraft that has gone into outer space via NASA has had some piece of technology from Aerojet Rocketdyne. In fact, they call them rockets from Redmond. Then you've got, of course, Blue Origin. Vulcan Aerospace is Paul Allen's company that was just announced a few months ago. Tethers Unlimited is a very interesting company in Redmond. And Planetary Resources. So I'll talk more about them in a second, but you have this core of companies, and then you have the IT infrastructure in Seattle, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. And then you have the Boeing and aerospace community. So all these things coming together, plus the University of Washington and a number of other private space supporting companies. People are viewing Seattle as a future private space hub. So this is an artist's conception of an asteroid, and Planetary Resources, that company, that logo you saw is in Redmond, and they want to mine asteroids for resources and minerals. That could be platinum, that could be water, hydrogen, has a number of uses. A lot of people at Planetary in the industry are fond of saying the first trillionaires will be made in space because some of these asteroids, they believe, can carry as much platinum as is on the entire Earth. So it might be platinum, it might be gold, but there's a strong motivator in terms of opportunity for these companies. So there's Planetary Resources and then Deep Space Industries, a couple competitors there. The next piece of opportunity, I mean, this may just look like another smiling astronaut, which it is. This is Butch Wilmore. He's a NASA astronaut, and this picture is taken on the space station. But what's significant about this picture is he's holding the very first usable 3D printed part made in space. So the company that actually made this possible is called Made in Space. And originally, they started out as a group of college students, and they saw an opportunity, and they sent a 3D printer out to the space station. And this is a crescent socket wrench. Yeah. And so what's significant about this is normally NASA, when they needed to fix something and they didn't have a tool for it, they had to wait for a resupply ship to send something up. Now they can print it when they need it. And it also has some implications for cost of getting materials into space. So if you combine something like this with a Bigelow habitat where you begin to make things, it's not a stretch to think about making a spacecraft, making spacesuits. 3D printers are pretty versatile in terms of what they can print, and Made Space will send its next generation printer up, hopefully by the end of the year, that will print many other materials besides this kind of ABS plastic type material that are more durable in the environment space. So Made Space is definitely one to keep an eye on. So once we talk outside of kind of low Earth orbit, we get to the Moon and Mars and what's happening there. This is the successor to the X Prize I mentioned. It's called the Google Lunar X Prize. It's $15 million for whoever can land a robotic rover on the surface of the Moon and beam back live video. So this is significant because you'll probably see corporate sponsorship, and there are a number of teams competing. And this probably will be the genesis of some sort of lunar colony, lunar base. There's plenty of resources on the Moon and reasons to be there as a waypoint to Mars, but this is definitely something to keep an eye on the next year or two. So the last piece, in terms of motivation, maybe the strongest one, and that's survival. This is an artist's conception of a large asteroid obviously impacting Earth, and I think for most of it, it's easy to sit here and say, well, that'll never happen, because we haven't seen it in our lifetime. We've never seen a major asteroid impact, you know. But in fact, we all know, or have been taught, that what killed the dinosaurs was a large asteroid. And statistics will tell you that if you go far enough out in terms of number of years, you will see certain size asteroids hit the Earth. And the further out you go in time, the more likely a large asteroid is to impact. So there's a company called the Sentinel mission. They are going to send up a telescope that will map the sky for potential hazardous asteroids. The difficulty now is that it's tough to see a dark asteroid on a dark background meeting space. So right now we're not prepared to deal with a major event. I mean, you guys have probably seen Armageddon at Deep Impact. You know the story there. But that's a big motivator. And when we talk about Mars, back to Elon Musk, he fundamentally believes that humans should be multiplanetary, meaning we should have another home besides the Earth. And it can kind of sound crazy to a lot of people, but when you think about statistics and odds and reasons, a case can be made. But he's so convinced that was the genesis for founding SpaceX. So the story goes that after he had sold PayPal, which is where he kind of made his money, he was looking for something to do. And he wanted to do something in space, and he wanted to do something in electric cars. We know how the story ends, but how it begins is he went to NASA's website because he was interested in NASA's plan for Mars. And he got to the website and realized there was no plan to get to Mars. He thought, well, I must just be in the wrong place. But it turns out NASA didn't have a plan for Mars. So he kind of started talking to people, working with the Mars Society, and his path led him down the realization that if he was going to do it, he would have to do it himself. So we talk about SpaceX lowering the cost of launch. Well, the real reason is not to get astronauts to the space station. It's to lower the cost of launch to make going to Mars even feasible, because it's still very technically complex and expensive. One of the reasons why it's complex is this chart shows you different orbits of the Earth in the middle and Mars outside. So you can see that it's closer together here, but further away here, which means if you're here, it takes about 6 months to get to Mars. If you're here, it can take more like a year. And that's significant because you're going to be in a small spacecraft with a few other people, and we don't all get along in big houses, in normal daily life, and we don't really know what it's going to be like to be in that kind of environment for a long time. So a lot to figure out there. But this is just an artist's conception of what a SpaceX habitat colony would look like. That's their landing craft, looks like the Dragon.
That's it?
Yeah, I know. Doesn't look very much fun, does it? No, it's going to take a special type of person to go to Mars. But SpaceX has competition now. Now that NASA woke up, now that Elon and SpaceX woke NASA up, they want to get in the game too. This is going to be their play. It's the SLS. Yes.
About both of the missions, the planned missions, are either of them one-way or two-way?
So,
Hey, it's a big question
It's
because
a valid
it takes
question.
so much more fuel
yes,
to
I'll
go back.
get to that. Yeah, it's a very valid question because it's so technically complex. So I'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. So you've got SLS, which is the successor to the space shuttle. It may remind some of you of the Saturn V, which is what launched the astronauts to the moon. Very, very large, powerful rocket. So you've got NASA and SpaceX. Then you've got Mars One. How many of you have heard of Mars One?
That's a one-way trip, eh?
What's that?
That's the one-way trip.
Yes. So Mars One, founded by a Dutch entrepreneur, and his idea is to send 24 people on a one-way trip to Mars. Meaning you go, but you probably don't come back. A lot of people think it's just a publicity stunt. MIT did a study of the mission plan, and they found some serious holes, technically speaking and logistically. But what's interesting, as I see it, is it taught the public, it showed us, the public, that there were not only a few people, but like hundreds of thousands of people that applied to do this, to go to Mars but never come back. And so I think it harkens back to, say, the Wild West, the adventure spirit of Americans and the world. And so I think they've done good from that standpoint. Now, will they ever accomplish their mission? Nobody knows, but they're down to their final 100 candidates. One of them lives here in Redmond, Carl McClinton. He works at Microsoft. I've met him. He's not crazy. Expect he gets it, and he said, well, it's worth a try. So
Is he married?
he's single and rides his bike to work every day.
Okay.
Has a simple life, but yeah, there's a big cross section of Mars One finalists. So
This planet starts to suck when people want to leave.
yeah, that's one way to look at it. I think there are people though that are so curious about Mars that they really want to go. So you've got the three, I think, big players. There will be others, and it's just a question of who will get there first. And Elon wants to do it before the end of the decade, but when you talk beyond Mars, I'm not going to touch on it a lot, like I mentioned, but anybody know what we're looking at here?
Europa.
Europa, yeah. So this is a moon of Jupiter, and it is completely covered in ice, but scientists believe that underneath that is water, and therefore believe that it's possible Europa could be harboring some sort of microbial life. And that's kind of what NASA alludes to when they talk about finding the first life. So this will be a prime candidate for NASA in terms of exploring, from a curiosity and scientific standpoint, what might be out there. So I'm going to play this last video for you. There's a lot of science fiction videos out there about space. But this one I thought was pretty cool because it's realistic, the graphics are great, and it's called Wanderers. I don't know what picture you guys just saw. That's my dog. I'm going to close this up. It's in her Tiana costume that she really loved.
For all its material advantages, the sedentary life.
Instead of elevator music waiting on the phone, you guys get to see pictures of my family. guess we get to start it over again.
Was that the Phoenix lights that were showing?
What's that?
Is that the Phoenix lights that are showing?
On the horizon,
The
then.
sedentary life has left us
Behind
edgy,
the curtain.
unfulfilled. Even after 400 generations in villages and cities, we haven't forgotten. The open road still softly calls. Like we've forgotten song of childhood.
Start over.
We made it.
We invest far-off places with a certain romance. The appeal, I suspect, has been meticulously crafted by natural selection as an essential element in our survival. Long summers, mild winters, rich harvests, plentiful game. None of them last forever. Your own life, or your band's, or even your species, might be owed to a restless few, drawn by a craving they can hardly articulate or understand, to undiscovered lands and new worlds.
It's a space elevator. That's Mars.
Herman Melville, Moby Dick, spoke for wanderers in all epochs
Sunset on Mars.
and meridians. He said, I am tormented with an everlasting itch for things remote. I love to sail for dim seas.
I think that's supposed to be Europa. Those are people, not aliens.
Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those are the worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. Silently, they orbit the sun, waiting.
So, kind of a cool video, kind of interesting. So that's actually all I've got for you. I'd love to open it up to discussion, questions you might have. I think I've done enough talking, and I'm sure you guys have lots of ideas on how to make space better. I'd love to hear them. So, anybody want to be the first to venture?
You mentioned the space elevators. How much would it cost to actually build one of those?
There's a conference, that goes on every year discussing that very issue. I don't know the number, but I know that it's, it's still prohibitively expensive, and then there's the technical elements, so. But there's avenues if you're interested, in exploring that idea, so. Do you have a question?
What if there was a mission to Mars, what would be the optimal food? Because you would have to grow your own food, hopefully, unless you want to make it a huge rocket.
So you're talking about once you get to Mars or on
Yeah.
your way to Mars, yeah?
Or, yeah, it's probably on your way, because you're going to run out.
Yeah, I mean, there's the kind of freeze-dried foods that they use on the space station now, and the different kinds of foods. Frankly, I don't know a lot about that. Like NASA is leading the charge there in terms of what you would eat, and I know that they are testing greenhouses to grow food in the Southwest, I think like Arizona, in terms of once they get there, how they can use the soil on Mars, which isn't suitable for life yet, but what can they do to make it suitable to grow food? When you have, I think, 60% less sunlight than you do on Earth. So it's definitely a challenge, though.
If you don't mind sharing, what is your educational background to get you to this point that you're interested in it?
Yeah, so I have a business degree.
Uh-huh.
My professional background is sales and marketing.
Okay.
At Microsoft and Packard, I've been in startups. But I had that kind of interest in space that went way back. And again, I was just becoming a father, becoming a dad, and wanting to do something important kind of led me to think back and, that early ambition. So that's why I'm here. Good question.
Yeah, if we're trying to find life on other worlds, isn't there some concern that if you bring it back here, something that lived in a very austere environment might come to the Earth and say, it's lunch, and it would be an alien species, invasive.
Sure.
I mean, even microbial, you'd never be able to get rid of it.
Hollywood has done that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the Apollo astronauts had to be quarantined for several days because they thought that there might be something on the moon that would do just that. I mean, in hindsight, a lot of people say, well, they were being overcautious. But I assume that, if we went to Europa or Mars and brought something back, that they would use that same approach. But the cost of bringing stuff back, again, I think people are going to Mars, but whether they're coming back and bringing stuff is another story. So.
Well, about the science fiction here, that's what happened at the end of War of the Worlds. It wasn't humans that killed the Martians, it was the microbes on the Earth.
It was the what?
The microbes on the Earth.
Oh, I see, yeah.
A different chemistry might not be even edible to alien life. Different amino acids and stuff.
Yeah, there's just so much we don't know,
Isn't another telescope going up in 2018?
The James Webb Space Telescope. Yeah.
That could be pretty exciting.
The James Webb will be the largest of any of NASA's telescopes, but it's more, I think it's going to primarily view infrared light, and it's aimed to give us a better understanding of the origin of the Big Bang, as opposed to Kepler looking for other planets. So I don't know what the plans are for a successor to Kepler.
Kepler would be fixed. It died a while back, or what happened?
Yeah, it has like 4 actuators that oriented correctly, and I think one of them broke, and it could still operate, but now 2 of them are broken, and it can't be fixed.
So go after it or not?
No, not cost effectively right now. So I don't know what the plans are, though. I mean, they can't do anything with it for the foreseeable future unless costs of these missions will come down. So, yeah. You have a question?
Yeah. So, have any planets in the solar system have oxygen sources?
Mars has what's called an atmosphere. So actually, our atmosphere is only a little bit of oxygen. It's actually mostly nitrogen. So Mars has a different mixture, but it's not a mixture that we could breathe. Venus is, I think, mostly carbon dioxide, which is something that you can't breathe. It's too hot, and the air is just not good for people. So to answer your question, no, there isn't an environment that a person could go to and breathe in our solar system. It would have to be outside of our solar system. Thanks for your question. Did you have another one?
Does Mars have any potential of getting a strong enough atmosphere to be terraformed so that the solar winds don't just rip everything off?
Yeah,
because that's what they're doing now.
Yeah, terraforming is clearly on everybody's mind in terms of making Mars habitable. But whether it's possible is kind of another story. So
500 years.
Right. Yeah, if you're talking very
many
long term,
trillions.
I think we first have to get there. And then we have to be able to survive there for a certain length of time on our own self-contained systems before we start talking about terraforming entire planets. So, yeah, good question.
Andy Weir's book, The Martian, any thoughts on it? Is it clean? Is it just kind of junk science?
To be honest, I haven't read Andy Weir's book. So, I listen to a lot of, I'm listening to Elon Musk's biography. I do a lot of current, I don't do a lot of science fiction, frankly.
Okay.
In space entrepreneurs, we've got a lot of people who who know science fiction, I go to them to learn, but I try to stay focused on what's kind of actually happening. So,
Totally.
I will see the movie for sure, and then probably read the book. So
Read the book. That's really good.
Making a movie?
What's that?
They're making a movie?
Yeah, they're making a movie of it. Yeah, yeah, exactly.